We are starting chapter 6. Now, really, in a sense, we just finished, if I'm going to call it that, the first subsection of Tanya, meaning chapters 1 through 5, in a sense, are a unit. They're all focusing on godliness, Kedusha, right? In chapter 1, we spoke about having the two souls, and then 2, 3, 4, and 5, in essence, we're focusing on godliness. The godly soul as literally a piece of God and the ramifications of that. Godly souls, the chinos, the powers of the soul. Godly soul's garments. And in chapter 5, on this highest manifestation of the godly soul when she's engarbed in the study of Torah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, godliness, 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 godliness. And now, starting with chapter 6, we're going to have another like subunit, if you will, 6, 7, and 8, where we focus on Klipa. Klipa again means the shell, the husk, the barrier to godliness. Everything is godliness. The most exalted and the most coarse and horrible and worse than that. Everything is godliness. The only building block of creation, the only matter of creation is godliness. So if we're looking at the horrors, if you're looking at Iran and its government, that's godliness? Yeah, it has to be godliness. If it wasn't godliness, it wouldn't be. So how is that godliness? Because the godliness is covered over. It's godliness, because if it wasn't godliness, it wouldn't be. But the godliness is covered over, so that which is receiving that godliness doesn't sense the godliness at all and isn't a manifestation of godliness at all. And that, of course, is the idea of klipa, which we discussed in chapter 1. And we really haven't spoken about so much since, because we're speaking about godliness. As we discussed in chapter 1, there's basically two broad categories of klipa. Klipas noiga and klipas timeos. Klipas noiga is a klipa that is transparent to a certain degree to the God energy. And klipas timeos is a klipa that completely blocks the God energy. And everything in this world that is not getting its life directly from godliness, Kedusha, like your soul, is receiving its life from one of these two channels that we're calling klipa. So anything permissible, but not inherently godly, is receiving its life from the channel called klipas noiga, like my cell phone, right? Not godly, not forbidden. It receives its life from klipas noiga. Anything God said no, the 365 prohibitions and all the thousands of prohibitions of the rabbis, every thought, speech, and action, an item of prohibition, receives its energy from klipas timeos. It's godliness. If it's godliness, it wouldn't be. But the godliness is so covered over that we can't access it. So klipas noiga, receiving its vitality from klipas noiga, like myself, this is godliness, covered over, but accessible, which means I can use this to serve God. I can elevate the energy, and it will free itself from the constraints of the klipa, of the covering, of the husk that doesn't allow it to shine. I can do something with this that allows this energy to shine. But if something is receiving its vitality from klipas timeos, from such a barrier like a brick wall that I can't see anything through it, most of the time, I can't utilize that and use it to serve God. I serve God by abstaining, by not using it. But the item and the godliness is still, so to speak, locked behind that brick wall. I can't access it. When I don't do it, I somewhat lessen the intensity of that darkness, but I can't shatter that darkness most of the time, except in unusual situations. The most significant item from the entire world that receives its vitality from klipas noiga is what? What will be the most significant item that receives its vitality from klipas noiga?
Our animal soul?
Our animal soul, exactly. Our animal soul. Our animal soul and our body receive vitality from klipas noiga. My body and animal soul are not inherently godly. They're not receiving their vitality from what we call Kedusha, the channel of direct godliness, like my godly soul. They're not inherently forbidden. So they're not receiving their vitality from the channel we call klipas timeos, where the godliness is completely obstructed, blocked behind that brick wall, and I can't access it. My body and animal soul are receiving their vitality from klipas noiga, which means there's filters, there are barriers. The light just shines through a little, but I can get through those barriers, like the parable of the window, not the wall, the apple peel, not the walnut shell. I can access that godliness. I can free it of the constraints of the barriers of the klipa. I can elevate it to God. So let us start reading chapter 6. Okay, famous verse. This parallel to this God made. What that verse is saying is God created our world that it should be balanced. It's a world of balance, meaning a world of, broadly speaking, two equal opposite poles. We have all the pulls to God and all the pulls away from God, sort of perfectly balanced to create for us this thing called free choice. Free choice is only possible if the pulls are equal. If there's a much greater pull on the side of godliness, well, what's my choice? If there's a much greater pull on the side of evil, well, what's my choice? So inside of me, inside of every one of us, inside of every Jew, we have two souls, two distinct entities, a godly soul and an animal soul, plus an evil inclination. The godly soul is much more powerful than the animal soul or the evil inclination. But the godly soul and the animal soul are made parallel. And the equality of choice is because here you have the godly soul operating in solitude, alone, and you have the animal soul, plus the evil inclination, plus everything in this world that's on their team. So when we look at these two poles, the godly soul versus animal soul, evil inclination, and everything in the world going in that direction, it becomes an equal choice. And God always coordinates the details so we have an equal choice, because when there's that equal choice, then I am freely choosing. Free choice is a very unusual thing, and honestly, a very difficult to explain thing, though we're not going to tremendously focus on it here. That's really the subject of like chapter 23 of Tanya. But it's a very precise gift that God gives exclusively in the realm of serving him. Meaning when we're in our world and doing our worldly things, we're not really freely choosing. We have a lot of what looks like choice, but we could call it compelled choice. I think I'm choosing, but it's not free because God is pulling the strings, and lo and behold, I chose. But anything that has to do with serving God, and only things that have to do with serving God, God creates these two poles, creates the opportunity for free choice. And within each one of us, that's the battle of the godly soul versus the animal soul and evil inclination. We can really understand the function of the animal soul to really create for us choice, or if you will, to create for us work. If I didn't have an animal soul and evil inclination, I'd be soaring high on godliness, but I wouldn't be working. We could say I'd much rather it that way. But God says, as it says in Job, Adam la'amal yulad, man was born to work, which means that God gifted us with an animal soul and gifted us with an evil inclination. So we have the opportunity to work, to overcome the challenges, to freely choose to serve him, to grow more and more transparent to God's energy. And that's our journey. And that's why the animal soul is a very incredibly significant component of our service. Ultimately, if one will become a tzaddik, right, that highest level possible, godly person, the evil inclination is gone. The evil inclination is destroyed. The evil inclination is absolutely evil, though the evil inclination is an angel, but an angel that's receiving its life from absolute evil, from what we call klipas tameos, cannot be elevated energy. So if one ascends higher and higher and higher, they come to a certain point of so absolutely loving God, absolutely hating evil, absolutely despising evil. It cannot exist inside of you, and the evil inclination is gone. The animal soul is not gone because, as Froma correctly said, The animal soul of the Jew is receiving its vitality from Klipas Noiga, from that channel that we can access and utilize its energies for good. So if a person achieves so much love for God and therefore so much hatred and despising of evil that they destroyed their evil inclination, it cannot exist inside of them because evil exists by virtue of us believing in it, of us fearing it, of us giving it power. So if you absolutely hate, absolutely despise the evil inside of you, you are removing all power from it, and therefore it doesn't exist. But the animal soul is Klipas Noiga. The animal soul receives its vitality from that channel that we can access and we can elevate and we can give to God. So just like I gave you the example of my cell phone, that the cell phone does not start out innately godly. It's receiving its life from a channel of klipa, a barrier to God's energy, but I can utilize it to serve God and elevate it so it becomes godly. How much more so can we elevate our animal soul? And that's the journey. So each one of us, as we're serving God at this moment, if you're with me, if your minds, if your eyes, if your ears, if you're focused and learning, at this moment, your animal soul is becoming refined. Your animal soul is part of the Torah you're learning. Your animal soul, the evil is burning away, like the very, very, very last vision of Tanya, of the wick that's charred by the flame. That's your animal soul getting charred by the godliness, the impurities burnt out. So bit by bit, we do this all the time, every time we serve God. Because every time we serve God, the animal soul is part of the process. The animal soul is hijacked. The animal soul is held in captivity and is against its will, working with us to serve God. But when one becomes a tzaddik, the absolutely godly, most perfect possible level for a Jew to aspire to, destroyed your evil inclination, that's coming from absolute evil, that's gone. And the animal soul is now serving God. So that will be the ultimate experience of the animal soul. So for most of us, as we're saying, the main function of the animal soul is to provide challenge, the weights that we have to overcome, the darkness that we have to get past, giving us free choice, giving us the ability to climb the ladder and get higher and higher to God. But ultimately, when we reach that peak, which we all will have, of course, by the redemption, by Mashiach, the animal soul is not gone. The animal soul is fused with the godly soul and together serving God. And when that happens, the godly soul is much more powerful than she is on her own. There's a verse from Shir Hashirim, from Song of Songs, speaking of the progression from the Exodus, the 49 days in the desert, until ultimately on the 50th day receiving the Torah, the holiday of Shavuos. And this verse from Song of Songs says, "Draw me, after you we will run. The king brought me into his chambers." Draw me is in the singular. It's the godly soul stuck in the evil of Egypt and saying, God, just take me out. I have no strength. Draw me. God pulls us out. Singular, the godly soul. But then the next stage, when we're in the desert, when we're counting the Sphira count, counting the days to get closer and closer to God to receive the Torah, the phrase from Song of Songs is, after you, we will run. We will run, as the Bavitch Rebbe explains, is plural now, because at this point, the animal soul is involved in the process. And the animal soul and the godly soul are working together to get closer and closer and closer to God to be able to receive the Torah. And it says, we will run, because an animal soul is an animal. So animal souls don't walk, they run. So when the animal soul is engaged, she's running to God. And when she's running to God, the godly soul is, why am I walking if she's running? So the godly soul also starts running to God. So the godly soul, inspired, impressed, impacted by the animal soul, is running with the animal soul to God. We will run. And then, of course, the holiday of Shavuos, God brought me into his chambers, as absolute fusion of the souls with God. So the animal soul is our challenge. The animal soul is creating free choice. The animal soul is the weights we're using to climb and overcome evil. And the animal soul, as we ascend, actually becomes, we will run, the force that's fused with our godly soul and helping our godly soul because it's energizing it, like that power of running, or like the verse we usually quote, an ox has a lot of productivity. Oxen are powerful. Animals are strong, much stronger than men. So the strength of the animal, the racing of the animal, channeled by the godly, makes the two of them together run toward God. So there's obviously deeper and deeper and deeper we could go to understand our animal soul, because on a certain level, my animal soul, my body, have a relationship with God even greater than the godly soul, especially my body. My body is receiving its vitality from that Klipas Noiga channel, as is my animal soul. And there's a certain level that in the body of the Jew is God's very essence and being, because God chose the body of the Jew. So that's a item of Klipas Noiga, and yet at the same time, it's an energy of God's essence and being. And that's why the Lubavitcher Rebbe very often quotes this concept that by the time of redemption, by the time of Mashiach, the energy of the body will feed the energy of the soul. And the soul's being fed by the body. The soul's a piece of God. The soul's a piece from God's essence and being. It is. But the body is God's essence and being. God's essence and being is invested in that body in a way deeper than in the soul, in a way. And therefore, the energy of the body will feed the soul. So the body, receiving its vitality from Klipas Noiga, and the animal soul, receiving its vitality from Klipas Noiga, are very powerful forces that when we start off, like in our current reality, are challenges, are forces that there's potential to expose godliness, potential to utilize this to get closer to God. And there's a lot of barriers. There's a lot of murkiness. There's a lot of darkness, but there's potential. As versus, for example, our evil inclination, which is completely from that channel called Klipas Timeos, non-penetrable energy, the brick wall. Only thing I can do is destroy it. And the animal soul and the body, like the apple peel, not the walnut shell, like the mirror window, not the wall, I can access the godliness and I can elevate them temporarily or ultimately by the tzaddik permanently to complete godliness, complete service of God. So with that background, what we're going to look at now and see the parallelism of the godly soul and the animal soul. Why are we saying parallelism? Why is it parallelism and why do we care? Because we quoted the verse, this parallel to this God made. And that verse was saying there's an equal opposite energy on the side of godliness and the side of evil. Why do we need that equal opposite energy? We said to create free choice. So now we want to see how, in a sense, godly and animal souls are like mirror images, but really very, very, very different, because the pull to God and the pull away from God, obviously very different, but parallel images. This opposing this, God made. So continuing, ki kimosh and nefesh elokis. Now we're going to list the parallelisms, because just like the godly soul, klula is comprised, me eser spheros kadeshos, from 10 holy channels of God's energy, umislabeshes b'shloisha levushim kadeshim, and is engarbed in 3 holy garments, as we've discussed, the garments of the godly soul, thought, speech, and deed, of Torah and mitzvahs. So to the soul from Sitra Achra. Sitra Achra is Aramaic, and it means the other side, the side of evil. From Klipas Noiga, well, not complete evil, because it's the animal soul of a Jew. So it's that level of Klipa that's Noiga. Noiga means there's a shine through it. There's a light shining through. We can see the light. So it's a shell that's Noiga, that I can see the shimmer, the glow that shines through. Hamluveshes bedam ha'adam, that is engarbed in the blood of man. As we learned in chapter 1 of Tanya, the animal soul's energy is found in the blood. So in our blood, primarily we said in the left side of our heart and throughout our whole body in the bloodstream, klula me'eser kisrin de mesavusa is comprised of 10 crowns of impurity, right? Godly soul has 10 powers, which we call 10 bechinos or 10 spheros. Animal soul has 10 powers, which we call the 10 crowns of impurity. Shein sheva midos ros, which are 7 evil emotions, habos me arba yisodus ra'im, which come from 4 evil elements, hanal, that we learned about in chapter 1, v'seichel hamolidan, and the intellect that births them. Not like on the side of the godliness, as we will discuss, hanechalak l'shalosh, but which is subdivided into 3, just like on the side of the godly. Shein chachma, bina, v'das, these 3 faculties of intellect, Makor hamidos, the source of the emotions, ki hamidos hen lefi erech haseichel, because the emotions are as per the quality of the intellect. So I just read a whole chunk there, and there's a lot of information showing both the parallelisms of godly and animal and differences. At the same time as we're saying the parallelisms, we see the differences. So what are the parallelisms? Well, we're saying 10 powers and 10 powers. Sorry, that looks like 5. 10 powers and 10 powers, right? We have 10, we can call them spheros or bechinos, attributes of God's energy shining, versus 10 crowns of impurity. But that's one parallelism, 10 and 10. And then the Rebbe said that they also subdivide the same way. The godly soul has intellect and emotions, and the animal has intellect and emotions. And then the Rebbe said it's the same number. The godly soul has 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. The animal soul has 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. And it's the same names and order. The godly soul has Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisod, Malchus. Soul has Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisod, Malchus. So they both have 10. They both have intellect and emotion. They both subdivide into 3 and 7. They both have the same names and the same order of the names. And they both have 3 garments. There's the godly expression through your thought, speech, and deed. And there's the evil expression through your thought, speech, and deed. That's 5 parallelisms. And there's a 6th, the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said, and both the godly, which we learned before, and now as we're saying the evil, the building block, what they're created from, are called the 4 elements. As we discussed in chapter 1, talking there about the godly soul, there are 4 spiritual elements that create everything in the spiritual reality, everything in the reality of godliness, and as we're learning now, everything in the reality of evil, everything in our physical reality as well. And that is fire, earth, wind, and water. There's a godly fire, earth, wind, and water, and there's a negative fire, earth, wind, and water. But everything in the composition of your godly soul is from the elements of fire, earth, wind, and water on the side of godliness. And everything in your animal soul is from fire, earth, wind, and water on the side of evil. So again, they both have 10 powers. They both subdivide into intellect and emotion. They both have 3 intellect and 7 emotions. They have the same names and the same order. They both have the garments, the 3 garments, and they both have the 4 elements. So of course, in all of these, as we're saying the similarities, there's also a lot of differences. As we said right away, by the godly soul, it's spheros. Spheros is from the word sapphire, a shining light. By the animal soul, we're talking about crowns of impurity. By the godly soul, there's a very different relationship of intellect to emotion than there is by the animal soul. By the godly soul, the intellect produces the emotions. The intellect are the parents of the emotion. By the animal, the emotions exist. They are birthed, if you will, like a midwife situation, by the intellect, but they're not created by the intellect, which we all understand because nobody had to teach us or create anger or jealousy, pride, tension, fear, stress. We have that naturally. So all the negative emotions we're born with, but the intellect is pulling it out. Before we discuss that more, let's focus for a second on this idea of the elements to again show this difference between the side of the godliness and the side of evil. So we said it's the same 4 elements, fire, earth, wind, water. But the difference is that fire, earth, wind, water on the side of godliness is a godly fire, earth, wind, water. Obviously, nothing here is physical. That is creating the godly traits of our godly soul. And on the side of the animal soul, it's a klipa version of fire, earth, wind, and water that's creating the powers of our animal soul. So on the godly side, fire is rising up to God. It's repentance. And water is humility. On the side of the animal, fire is ego, is pride, is anger. Wind is boasting. Earth is depression. Water is indulgence. So fire, earth, wind, water, fire, earth, wind, water. But it's very different if it's repentance or anger and ego, if it's self-sacrifice, if it's humility or if it's indulgence in one's passions and depression. So fire, earth, wind, water, but create something very different if it's coming from the godly fire, earth, wind, water, or from the animal fire, earth, wind, water. So that's sort of showing you that at the same time, we came up with like 7 parallelisms, but there's differences, right? Godly, evil, differences. Also, I speak about the garments. So it's the same 3 garments, the powers of you, thought, speech, and action. Meaning at any moment, something is dressed in your thoughts. Every second you're thinking, every second you're alive, you're thinking, something is controlling your thoughts. So that power of thought, that garment of thought, is either being controlled by the godly soul or being controlled by the animal soul every second of your life. Well, how do I know? Well, what are you thinking about? If you're thinking a thought of Tyra, of service of God, godly soul. Everything, anything else is the animal soul. Your speech are your words of Torah, words of service, words of commandments, of mitzvahs, godly soul. Anything else, animal soul. Your actions, are your actions serving God, commandments, doing something to further God in this world, godly soul. Anything else, animal soul. So we have literally the same thought, speech, and action, but who's controlling it? It goes in very different directions. And now the Rebbe is going to focus a bit more on this idea of the interaction of the emotion and intellect, really how it works in the animal soul, which is a direct contrast, is very different than in the godly soul. So as I explained, in the godly soul, you have 3 intellectual faculties, like you have 3 intellectual faculties in the animal soul, and they are called the mothers. If you remember, we learned this, that the intellect are the mothers. And we said, why are they the mothers? Because they give birth to the children meaning the emotions. The godly intellect creates the godly emotion, which means if I want to love God, I have to use my faculties of mind, learn about God, think about God, contemplate, meditate to create a feeling for God, to create a love for God, to create an awe of God, to create a joy in God. I have to use my mind, harnessing my spiritual faculties of thought to create a feeling, because I don't feel it otherwise, because my intellect creates my emotions. Meaning in the side of the godliness, the intellect is dominant. The godliness is primarily intellect driven. It's an intellectual expression of God's energy. Of course, there's very, very strong, intense emotions on the side of the godliness, but they're all coming from the intellect. Conversely, on the animal soul, it's an animal. Animals have very small brains, so it's primarily emotionally driven, but there is an intellectual component. What's the intellectual component? Is the intellect creating the emotions? We said, no, we're born with all these bad traits. We don't need anything to create them. We have jealousy and pride and ego and tension and fear. We're born with that. True. So what's the intellect doing? So the intellect, we're told, is allowing it to express itself. We said like the midwife, bringing it out. So the more your intellect expands, the more the emotion will expand or will have new vistas to express itself on. A child who's greedy, greedy, bad emotional trait. So if the child is greedy, when they're small, they can be greedy for a bigger piece of cake or the extra candy or another toy from the dollar store. Well, if they stay greedy when they're 15, none of those things are going to cut it. And not when they're 25 or 35 or 45. The emotion might not change. It might be the same greed. I mean, if they didn't work on themselves and improve, it'll actually probably get worse because the more you use the animal soul, the stronger it gets. So if you started off greedy and didn't improve, you got worse and worse and worse. But there's new vistas for that greed. As your mind develops, what's a candy? What's a bigger piece of cake? It's not that your greed changed. It's just that's not going to satisfy your greed. Your greed actually got worse because, as I'm saying, our animal souls, the more we use them, the stronger they get. Some people are born with animal souls like oxen or bulls, and some people are not. Some people are born with animal souls like little lambs. But if you take that little lamb and keep giving into it and giving into it and giving into it, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and it becomes that bull. So that greedy child if he or she never works on themselves to change, it's not they'll be just as greedy and have new vistas for their greed. They'll be a lot more greedy. They'll have a lot more energy and intensity in that greed, because the more you use it, the bigger it gets. Just like our sages say about this lust, this drive for money, says someone who has 200 wants 400, and someone who has 400 wants 800. And if you had 800, you want 1600. Meaning whatever you have, it doesn't satisfy you. It's the catalyst to need more. The I doesn't get, oh, okay, if I feed it, I'll take care of it. Like terrorists, right? This is 50 years from Entebbe, right? In July 4th, the 6th of Tammuz, 50 years ago. And Israel did it right. Israel said, we can't give them, what do they want? $5 million and 55 terrorists, I believe. We can't do that. If we give in to them, it'll just mean no Jew in the world is safe, as we see today. No Jew in the world is safe, because if we give in, they'll just want more. They'll just hijack another plane and find another way to grab Jews and demand. And we give in to the demands and demand. We're not going to pacify them. We don't pacify terrorists. We don't pacify evil. So what's been happening for 50 years ago, we did it right. But what's been happening, unfortunately, since many, many times was this mode of, we want peace, so let's pacify them. Let's give them what they want, and then they'll be happy and they'll like us, right? Lo and behold, we give them what they want, and they want more. That's not unique to terrorists. That's exactly how evil works. Gush Katif.
Look what...
Yes, Gush Katif is Gaza. Absolutely. Absolutely. Horrific, horrible, true example. Gush Katif. Were they satisfied? No. Now we have Gaza. We have the whole strip of terror. And that's, again, we see it so clearly in Israel, and it's so obvious, at least to us. We're not in the hot seat that can have the control and the power. So to us, it's very obvious, if you give in to terrorists, they'll want more. Why did October 7th happen? The primary goal of Hamas was to take hostages, to release their terrorists that are sitting in Israeli jails, getting a lot of money, because the PA pays you as per how many Jews you kill, right? They pay per head that you killed, and you're sitting in jail and it's racking up in your bank account. And then eventually Hamas does something, or whatever other terrorist organization does whatever, and you get released and you're a millionaire because you have all these months of payment from the PA, from money from the UN, that's probably from money given by America to the UN, to the PA, to the terrorists. Pay for slay. That's what they call it. Pay for slay.
But we value life in such a different way, and so much more than Lahavdil they do. So it's like there's no comparisons.
And since we value life, we have to not give in to terror, because when you give in to terror, you make it want more and feel more confident in its demands. And that's, of course, the message the Rebbe always gave, is we don't negotiate with terrorists. I'm saying by Entebbe, they did it right. They went and they rescued them. That's doing it right. But giving into terror, well, let's give in, so we're pacify them. That's not how evil works. That's what we're learning exactly here in this chapter of Tanya. Evil doesn't work that way. You give in to evil, it wants more. Again, it's not only happening in Gaza and Lebanon and Iran. It's happening inside ourselves. When we give in to our passions grow. When we give in to our weaknesses get stronger. When we give in to our fears control us. Exactly the same dynamics, like when you give in to terrorists, they want more. Because the animal soul, an expression of this evil, the more you give it voice, the more it grows. You can't pacify it. Can't be like, oh, I really want to do this wrong thing. Let me just do it, and then it'll be happy. I gave it something, so it will stop bothering me. No, you give it space, it wants more. It grows. It gets stronger and stronger and stronger, like all evil. And like I'm saying, what we see playing out in the world's arena with all these forces of evil, all these terrorist organizations, all these countries of terror, like Iran and North Korea and all these other countries of terror, the more power they have, doesn't satisfy them. They want more and more and more. And that's exactly the dynamics within ourselves. Our animal soul, the more we give it voice, the stronger it becomes. It might have started off a lamb, and it might be now a bull. because the more we allow it voice, the more we allow it to be the leader, it controls our garments of thought, speech, and deed, the stronger and the stronger and the stronger it gets. So we're starting off with, on the side of the godly, intellect ruling. On the side of the animal, emotions ruling. On the side of the godly, the intellect are the parents. On the side of the evil, the intellect are like the midwives. So on the godly side, I want to feel a godly emotion. I have to work and create it with my mind. On the evil side, I have all the evil emotions. I don't have to create them, but my intellect is like the midwife, giving it more and more space, more and more dimensions for that evil to unfold. So if we're looking inside, the Rebbe says this, because a child, he desires, he loves small things of small value, the candy, as I said, the bigger piece of cake, the toy from the dollar store. Because his mind is so small, to grasp things that are more valuable. And also, if he gets angry, from very small things. And also with boasting, and all other emotions. So, as I'm saying, it's not that, and when this child grows up, his boasting will stop, or his anger will stop, or his desires will stop. No, you use those traits, they'll get stronger. But not only will they get stronger, but they'll have a different pay grade. They'll have a different bar for what's going to satisfy them, for what's going to be their object of the anger or the boasting or the greed or the desire. That's the dynamics of intellect, emotion on the side of the animal. Any questions on this?
I do. I'm just wondering, at birth, right? Is it our survival instincts that you would say was the animal? Like we need to eat, it's survival. Like if we didn't have the animal instincts, we couldn't survive. But they're not evil yet. They're neutral, right?
Well, you're 100% right, but there's nothing neutral. The animal soul is never neutral, but the survival instincts is one way, the most minor and mild expression of the animal soul, meaning the animal soul, as I was going to say, probably not get to it now, but I can definitely say it now to answer your question. The animal soul is klipas naga, like you said, is that energy that we can elevate. We can elevate my cell phone. We can elevate our animal soul. Right now, we are all elevating our animal soul. We are all learning Torah. When I learn Torah, my animal soul is part of the process. Why is my animal soul part of the process? My animal soul doesn't want me to connect to God because my godly soul never directly interfaces with my body. My godly soul is too spiritual. So the godly soul is gripping the animal soul to be the interface with my brain for me to learn Torah right now. So therefore, at this moment, my godly soul and my animal soul's power of thought and my human power of thought and my physical brain cells are all connected to God as I study his will and wisdom. And that's refining the animal soul. So the animal soul can go up. Every time I do right, my animal soul is refined. I could do right big time, like a commandment, like I'm studying Torah. I could do right in general by living a godly life. So anytime, in other words, it's not like, well, if I'm learning Torah or doing one of the 613 commandments or any of the rabbinic ones, it's godly soul and all the rest it's animal. No, because there's also living for God. So if I'm living for God, when I'm doing my laundry, it's also for God. And when I'm shopping, it's also for God. And when I'm cooking, it's also for God because I'm living for God. So in any of those pursuits, if I'm living for God, as I'm cooking for God and shopping for God and taking a shower for God and getting dressed for God, my animal soul is part of the process. My animal soul is getting closer to God. It's getting refined. And if I'm actually doing a commandment, whoa, my animal soul is going very high because the commandment's very high. On the downside, there's basically 3 levels, very broad categories of how my animal soul is lowered. The first one, as you're saying, is need. Let's say I'm not living for God, but I'm not indulging in passions and desires. I don't brush my teeth in the morning with passion and desire. I brush my teeth in the morning so my teeth will be healthy. Well, if I'm not living for God, brushing my teeth is not a godly act. But it's not an act of indulgence, and it's not forbidden. So what is it? It's the animal soul in its most mild form. it's still going down. Whenever the animal soul is dressed, she goes down. Whenever the godly soul is in control, the godly soul goes up and the animal soul is refined because she's part of the process. Whenever my animal soul is in charge, she goes down, but she doesn't always go down the same. So if it's need, if it's that child sucking, if it's that brushing your teeth in the morning or doing your laundry or shopping for food or cooking or eating, all no pleasures, just functionality, it's all animal soul if you're not living for God. And the animal soul is going down, but mildly, very small.
I guess what my question really is more like an infant, a newborn, there's no sin. So at what point does the animal soul, like where is it where it's getting drawn into
the animal soul is right in the beginning. Your animal soul is in the beginning, even before your godly soul.
But there's no sin yet. But there's
not sin. That's what I'm saying. That's what I was trying to explain. I guess I was so long-winded. I wasn't clear. When you are doing things that are need-based,
right?
Unless you're living your life for God, need-based is animal. But it's a very mild version of the animal because it's not a transgression and it's not even a pleasure. It's just a need.
Right.
So that baby who's eating and sleeping, and it's animal soul. They're at this point not able to live their life for God. It's animal soul, but it's a very minor manifestation. The basic three things, as I'm saying, are need, much lower pleasure in the permissible, and much, much, much lower a transgression.
Okay.
So the baby is not transgressing, and the baby is not considered indulgence and pleasures.
Right.
Need. So it's a tiny expression of the animal. It is an expression of the animal, but it's the most mild expression of the animal possible because it's just pure need. Just like in an adult, if you're brushing your teeth, is your godly soul controlling you? Only if you live your life for God. If you live your life for God, brushing your teeth is also for God. And it's also an expression of your godly soul. And if you don't live your life for God, is brushing your teeth a sin? It's never a sin. It's an indulgence? I don't think it's an indulgence. It's need. So the animal soul is controlling, but it's the most minor expression of the animal soul.
Okay.